our tradition. If we may recite the full weight test of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Pleasure to introduce my colleague Dave Swartz. Dave has been serving in recent years as District Director in Dauphin, Cumberland, and Perry Counties. He's been with Penn State Extension for 30 years in a variety of positions in Southeast and South Central Pennsylvania. In addition to his leadership and supervisory responsibilities with Extension, Dave is well known for his efforts in market outlook education seminars which he presents around the state. These seminars adapted for either food producer or consumer audiences, relate trends in international trade for food commodities to farm gate and grocery store prices. I'm sure he'll be interested in what he has to share today. Welcome, Dave.
Want this one?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, got it. Good. Well, thanks for the invitation to be here today. I can tell you that over my career in Extension, I have spoken in front of a lot of Rotary clubs over the years. I have never heard that rendition of the Battlefield of the Republic. So you guys are tops on that. Yeah, that's great. We want to talk today a little about these three things very quickly, and I know we're on a schedule here. We want to talk a little bit about the demands that consumers are placing on production agriculture. We want to talk about some consumption patterns of major food items, and finally, the way in which the changing world economy is changing our agriculture here in America and here in Lancaster County. I was visiting my son and daughter-in-law in Dallas last summer, and they said, "Hey, Dad, you got to come to this new grocery store called Sprouts." And we don't have those here in the Northeast, but it's a chain of stores in that part of the country. So outside of Dallas, we went into Sprouts grocery store, which is a cross between a Whole Foods and a farmer's market. An interesting place, and I had to buy this block of cheese that I saw, mainly because of the label. You can see that the entire front part of the cheese is covered with this label, and it has is trying to push every single consumer buying button that you could possibly push. And in fact, I think they think that the consumers are kind of dumb, because it says organic here, it says organic here, it says organic here. It says non-GMO here, it says non-GMO here. It's grass-fed, it's American Humane Certified. I mean, and it even has a Jersey cow grazing under the redwoods. Which there is nothing for a Jersey cow to eat under the redwoods, but nonetheless. Okay. But just think of that, and you know, they were offering this for sale at $10 a pound, which normally I would never pay $10 a pound for cheese, but I wanted to. I didn't feel right about taking a picture of it and leaving it lay there, so I bought the block of cheese. And by the way, it tasted really good, but this is what production agriculture faces, is a lot of our consumers have these purchasing points that they want food produced in a certain way. And increasingly, we see all parts of the food system, and when I say the food system, I'm talking about production agriculture, the food processors, and then the retail establishments, all across the food system are certainly responding in ways we've never seen before to these consumer demands. General Mills was the first large food processing company in the country to say they would go non-GMO with their Cheerios back years ago. And all the other food manufacturers watched this, and this was very successful for General Mills. And so other food manufacturers have jumped on the bandwagon. Recently, Hershey Foods last year said all of their products by 2019 will be non-GMO. And of course, that makes a major change for Hershey because in America, half of our sugar, our table sugar, half of it comes from cane sugar and half of it comes from sugar beets. And almost all of our sugar beets in America, almost 100% of them are GMO. They're Roundup Ready. And so Hershey will have to now source all of their sugar from cane sugar, not from sugar beets. Well, food service is responding. Many of us know the story of Chipotle, who were out there on the edge, the darling of Wall Street, a new business model, and they failed dramatically and spectacularly because they could not control the processes by which they prepared food, stored it, and served it. And so that they, as a public company, lost half their value of their stock and are now trying to woo customers back to their brand. Panera Bread has approached this more slowly, but nonetheless relentlessly moving in this direction. And in fact, many of you who patronize Panera know that they have this clean food thing going on. And when I first saw that billboard along the road where it said 100% of our food is clean, I thought, well, I hope so. but they have redefined what the word clean means. Okay? Panera has redefined what this word clean means. And when they say clean, they mean not just free of bacterial contamination, like what you and I would think of, but free from all binders and extenders and artificial preservatives and artificial colorings and any of those kind of products. That's what they now say the word clean means. So certainly food retailers are responding to consumer demands as well. Well, consumers are not only pushing for food produced in a certain way and that certain ingredients are or are not in the food, but they're also pushing for perfection. What do you notice about that box of tomatoes? Perfect, right? This was, I took this picture last summer at the Mennonite produce auction out at Shippensburg, Cumberland County. Okay, you'll notice, how are these different from the tomatoes you grow in your garden? There's no cracks at the stem because the water has been perfectly controlled. There's no bleaching on the shoulders because the sunlight exposure has been perfectly controlled. There's no insect damage. Okay, these were all grown under high tunnel, under plastic, where everything in the environment is totally controlled. And that's how you get a box of tomatoes that look like they were punched out of a machine, which is what the consumer wants. The interesting thing is that the consumer doesn't want to pay for perfection anymore. They just expect it, okay? So all of that extra cost that the tomato grower puts into making the perfect tomato is now being borne by the producer, not by the consumer. Okay? Those of us that have gray hair and are pretty old, you know, we used to demand perfection. We didn't want a worm in our sweet corn, but we didn't care if the farmer sprayed so that there was no worms in the sweet corn. Our kids now expect no worms in the sweet corn, but they expect no spray either. Okay? So the consumer demands are putting a great deal of stress on our production ag. Fortunately, by research and good management, we're responding to these and providing what the consumers want. Finally, consumers want convenience, and I want to just take you real briefly through this really busy slide. Now, this was research that was done for the year 2010, which was right after we had the supposed economic crisis in this country. Okay, so these two, this is the share of the food dollar that consumers spent on basic ingredients and complex ingredients, meaning you had to go home to your kitchen and prepare this to make food. Okay, this is like flour, sugar, milk, stuff like that. You can see that only 23 cents out of every dollar that consumers spend in America is spent on those basic items. 8% or 8 cents out of a dollar is ready to cook foods. 18 cents is ready to eat foods. 27 cents out of every dollar is spent at fast food restaurants. Now that just doesn't mean Burger King and McDonald's. That's anywhere where you walk up and order your food. So like Panera and other restaurants, fast casual type chains fall into that 27%. And then sit-down restaurants, 23%. Look at that. After the economic crisis in America, still this was how the average consumer spent their food dollars. Okay? That's amazing. And so the bottom line of this is there's very little cooking that's done by families anymore. But what's really also interesting about this on the left is the advertising expenditures by those categories. And you can see that 30% of all food advertising dollars is spent on the ready-to-eat foods. And that's not just because Doritos has commercials during the Super Bowl. Okay? But what does that tell you about that category of foods? If 30% of the advertising is spent in that category. Plenty of profitability there, right? So there's the food manufacturers that are making those ready-to-eat foods. They have such a profit margin built into that they can afford to put that much advertising out there to push that part of our food system. Kind of interesting. And I thought as business people, you would enjoy that slide. Okay, let's look real quickly at consumption patterns. Let's look at where some of these categories were 100 years ago compared to now. And you can see that beef is very similar. The average American eats about a little over 50 pounds of beef a year. Pork has decreased somewhat. What do you think about fish? It doubled in 100 years. And what do you think about chicken? You in Lancaster County ought to know this better than anybody. It went from 15 pounds per person to 85 pounds per person and shows no signs of slowing down. Now, one of the reasons for this obviously is that in 1910, if you were hungry for a chicken sandwich, you had to catch a darn thing first. That cut down on how much consumption there was. Especially for a guy like me, I would never be eating chicken. I couldn't catch the things. So the average American eats twice as much fish and seafood, 20% less pork, same amount of beef, and 5.5 times as much chicken as we did 100 years ago. Well, this is a really interesting thing. Look at the turkey consumption. And you only ever see turkeys going out of the store at Thanksgiving in November. And I thought, how could there be that big an increase in turkey consumption? Of course, that's really the ground turkey, where people are replacing ground beef for nutritional reasons. This is pounds of eggs. And look at what happened with consumption of eggs in the 1970s when the heart doctors started to tell us that eggs were the cause of everything that was wrong with us. And you can see the decrease in consumption of eggs. And look at the consumption of cheese. It went from 5 pounds a year up to 36 pounds. Some of you ate 5 pounds of cheese off of that salad bar today at lunch. What accounts for so much increase in cheese consumption? Yeah, right. Very few people ate pizza in 1910, and this is almost all cheddar and mozzarella. And so food service, either Mexican or Italian type foods that we eat a lot when we go out to restaurants, accounts for this. The restaurant industry is very good to our nation's dairy farmers for pushing cheese consumption. Very interesting. Okay, and then finally, just for those of you who love vegetables, I put broccoli. How much broccoli do you think we ate in 1910? Zero. We were smart back then. And so it wasn't until 1970 that we started to eat broccoli, the same decade where people were adopting pet rocks. That was a really dumb decade. And now, we're up to 7 pounds per person these days. As much as my wife and daughters feed me a broccoli, that'd be 20 pounds a person. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to see the difference. Well, let's look quickly at a changing world economy then. Increasing incomes around the world because of world trade has been driving food production and trade patterns. Our American food agriculture, the agriculture industry here in Lancaster County, is absolutely dependent on world trade. 50% of all the hogs are in China, 90% of all the aquaculture is in China. There's a huge demand for plant protein to produce all of this animal protein. And when you see plant protein, you should think soybeans. Okay? The top 4 soybean producing countries in the world are the United States, Brazil, Argentina, and China. The top 3 of those produce 80% of the world's supply of soybeans. And China is the largest customer for soybeans from all the top 3 countries. Okay? There is this giant sucking sound from the world to China for plant protein because their people have enough income now to want animal protein in their diet. In fact, what we have found is that when families get to the income level where they have $2 per family per day of net income, the first thing they do with that extra money is put animal protein in their family's diet. And enough Chinese have done that now to cause tremendous changes in world trade. This is the amount of bushels of soybeans that go to our top customers. So you can see that China is number 1 by a huge amount. Mexico is number 2. Well, China produces 4 times the amount of hogs the United States does, and yet this past year, on many weeks, China bought 5,000 tons of pork from the United States every week. Okay? In November, a new export record was set for pork. 510 million pounds of pork left our country in 1 month to go to other countries. These were the largest customers in November. These were the amount of, in millions of pounds, that these countries bought. Now, those of you who are up on currency fluctuations know that 2 years ago, the Mexican peso, 13 Mexican pesos would buy $1. Today, 2 years later, it takes 24 pesos to buy $1. So how can Mexico continue to afford to buy all this pork from us, and dairy, and beef, and soybeans, when its peso has been so devalued against our strong dollar? Well, the reason is because we have such an oversupply of ag products right now in our country that our domestic prices have crashed. And so the pork price is less than, this year, will be less than half of what it was 2 years ago. This will be a really rough year for pork producers in our country. And so even though our dollar has strengthened against the Mexican peso because our domestic price of pork has crashed so much, to a Mexican, our pork looks as if it's the same price, irregardless of the currency fluctuations. Here is a graph showing since 2001 in billions of dollars what our food exports are. And you can see our 3 biggest customers are Mexico, Canada, and China, and almost those 3 customers account for 50% of all of our food trade. Now this, as President Trump talks about renegotiating NAFTA, and he always, during the campaign, and even now, he's talking about manufacturing issues as to why he wants to renegotiate parts of NAFTA. Across this country, production agriculture is holding its breath and sending very strong messages to the White House that, hey, President Trump, it's, you want to renegotiate NAFTA, fine, but just remember that we depend greatly on NAFTA for the export of agricultural products. Because the two trading partners in NAFTA, Canada and Mexico, are some of our biggest trade partners in food. And so, you know, if the president decides to put tariffs on Mexican-produced manufactured goods, we're not sure what Mexico would do with food products going the other way into their country. Well, here are the top ranked, our top customers for our food products. The top 11 customers around the world. And you can see that many of those are in the Pacific Rim. Well, some people say, well, how much of our food products actually are exported? And if you took all of our food products, all of our animal products, vegetable products, whatever, and put it all together, somewhere between 25 and 30% of everything we produce in our country is exported. Okay? Well, those of you in business know that if we wouldn't have that market, our industry would be in a real serious hurt. The products that we send the most overseas are cotton and almonds. We send over 75% of our crop each year overseas. We send more than half of our soybean crop, our wheat crop, and our rice crop overseas. We send 25 to 28% of our pork, our chicken. 1 out of every 4 pigs and 1 out of every 4 chickens goes overseas. And we send 25% of our processed vegetables overseas. You know what the term, that's a technical export term, processed vegetables. You know what that really means? Frozen French fries. That's really what that means. The Pacific Rim countries, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia, they love our frozen French fries. You know? And we send about 15% of our potato crop as potatoes overseas. Anyhow, this is a real key for you guys who are watching your cholesterol and your wife's really on you about it, you know, or your spouse. When you go home, and in my case, my wife would say, "What did you have for lunch today?" Well, I hate to say that I've had a hamburger and French fries. So if I say, I had a hamburger and processed vegetables, it's great. That's just, you guys are glad you came to Rotary today. Okay, so America, with 320 million people, is a distant third. We are the 3rd most populated country on the earth. Of course, China is number 1 and India is number 2. And most folks think that by 2019, India will overtake China as the most populated country. The one-child policy that China has had for decades has made their country hold down quite greatly on population. So their average age is around 37 in China. The average age in India is 25. And so the difference in reproductive ability without any government interference between a population whose average age is 37 versus a population whose average age is 25 is incredible. I told you earlier about how China has sucked in year after year so many of the world's resources with plant proteins. If India ever gets its economy together, and if the vast majority of the folks in India ever have the ability to improve their income, we will have a real challenge in production agriculture around the world to feed all of those people in ways that they are asking for. So that'll be the challenge for the next generation. All right, well, we've talked about these 3 things, and there's much more we could talk about, but in light of the time, I'll quit there and be glad to take any questions you might have. Thank you for your attention.